Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Liam and I'm speaking to you from the Hedge in the heart of Wiltshire, other known as the Land of the Willows. Now, before we start today's topic, the acorn, just like to check in, see how you're doing. So if you just feel like popping a comment down below, let us know how you are, how your day is going, and one thing you're looking forward to today. It'd be really nice to hear. So before we go into the topic, I just need to let you know that if it sounds like there are bombs going off and tanks firing, um, that is exactly what you can hear. We here in Wiltshire are close to Salisbury Plain, which is a military testing site. So, you know, whilst we're never quite far away from the machines of modernity, we can find little sanctuaries like this hedge, which are havens and places of quiet peace in between all the noise. So I'm really grateful you could join us here today. Now today, rather than a story, I have a topic or an idea for you that I would like to unpack because I believe is of great value. It has been of value to me and I will believe has been of value to you as well. Now, this idea came to me yesterday after I woke up and walked down the towpath past the oaks under a stone bridge and I arrived at my friend's boat. Now a knock knock knock, no answer. So I knock 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 again and I hear a little rustle and a grunt as the boat starts to rock and the ripples echo out from the hull, which is how you know you've woken someone up out of bed in the morning. Before long, a little window slides open and out pops the smiley face of Shonaki Eva, my good friend Sean. He says, "Come in for a cup of coffee, I'll put the kettle on." So I step aboard across the plank and cozy down inside his cabin. And as we're sat there and the coffee's brewing, he brings my attention to a pot of acorns. Now, I said, "Sean, what are these acorns for?" He said, "As you know, I'm a digital artist." Sean is a digital artist. He creates beautiful artwork of his travels, of moments, and he enhances them digitally to bring out the essence and the quintessence of these moments from his travels across the canal and elsewhere. So he said to me that these acorns are to give as a gift for people who receive his artwork. And I'm receiving a piece of artwork from him that morning. I took one of his acorns. Thank you, Sean. And as I walked home that evening, I found it again in my pocket. And I looked at it and I thought, yeah, this is a very, very powerful symbol, this acorn. And it reminded me of a book that I read years ago, a book called The Souls Code by a psychoanalyst called James Hillman. Now, James Hillman was a psychoanalyst in the Jungian tradition, so concerned with memories, dreams, reflection, synchronicity, and this concept of a soul. So in this book, he postulated a theory, the acorn theory. And the acorn theory is this idea that destiny, your full potential as a unique human being, is contained within the code of your soul. So when we compare it with the acorn, it's the idea that the blueprint of the oak in its full manifest growth and beauty is contained already within the acorn. Okay? So what this does as an idea is it takes the traditional idea of psychology of this happened to me, that happened to me, I was bullied, my parents divorced, then we moved school 5 times. And that's why I got here. And it traumatized me and I'm healing. It takes this idea and turns it on its head. And actually explains or imbues suffering with meaning. And that the soul on some level, has chosen these life circumstances because it was only through the distillation, the process of these life circumstances, that enabled us to become truer versions of ourselves and eventually grow our souls, or be grown to become these magnificent oak trees, to reach our full potential as human beings. So it's a very controversial but powerful idea, because it shows that deep inside of us, each one of us, we have our own destiny or calling. And that calling is an attractor, so an end point that is pulling us to that event. So rather than being pushed out into the world and stumbling through all these circumstances, there is already an idea of who we are meant to be. The truest version of ourselves, who is perfectly positioned to be of great service to themselves and others. And that when you look back from this point of a manifest oak tree, when you look back through your life, what you see and what you notice are patterns, rhymes, and codes that foretell your destiny or your calling. So a really good example of this is in James Hillman's book, The Souls Code, where he explains a young man who is very timid in his culture, machismo culture, I believe it's Italy, Spain. And he is so timid that he's always in fear, and he hides behind his mother's apron strings, behind her cloth dress. Anytime someone comes to the door, he hides behind the cloth of this fear. Now this young man eventually becomes one of his culture's most famous, bravest bullfighters. Okay, so from this timid young man, he becomes this great, famous, brave bullfighter. Now, traditional psychology would say that the reason he became this bullfighter is because he had to compensate for being a timid young man. However, his fear of who was ever at the door and his hiding behind the cloth was a perfect poetic foretelling of him in his future, in his full potential, as a hero, as a role model, stood behind this cloth as this great fear, as this great monster, this beast charges towards him. So you can see how this myth of his life is played out. So the acorn theory, it really gets us to sink in, reflect, remember the events of our lives. What things attracted us as children, what passions we had, how we responded to the events. I'm sure you can think of some examples of these rhymes throughout your life. So the acorn's image is trying to speak. Every person has an acorn. Every person has a code or a set of experiences, early life attractions, passions, that all come together to form this unique person and a unique set of gifts that are of great service to themselves, the world around them, and really is the manifest potential of who they really are. So it's this idea that the blueprint of the oak in all its greatness is contained within the acorn. So rather than going through life from one circumstance to another and reacting to the events of life, we can really turn it around and look at it as though the story of our life is unfolding from within. Okay? So it's less about trying to fix our lives and take the broken pieces of our lives and bash them back together. And it's also less about going, oh, why has this all happened to me? Why am I so unlucky? You know, both of these are this sort of swinging like a pendulum from one to another. And it's only a matter of time until, you know, when you've been banging against the walls of life, that, hey, you might find yourself back in this victim mentality, this place of desperation, where at least, unlike the fixer, you are asking, perhaps not always earnestly, but you are asking, why has this happened to me? Why have these events happen in my life? But then also, how can I respond to these events so that when I look back, I go, yeah, well, that was a great, great challenge. But the way I responded to that has led me here. And if that didn't happen, then I wouldn't be where I am today. And this is something you hear people say a lot, especially people who are older and lived a lot longer than I have. You know, and they have that reassuring sense of, don't worry, things will always work out. Now, obviously, tragedies happen. However, I've met enough people in my life to know that no matter what trials and tribulations you go through, these are forming you, or the you at the end of your struggles is a clear, bright and beautiful image that is a result of and a necessary outcome of all the things you were supposed to go through to reach your full potential. So it's like this idea of the vision, the image of the sculpture, of the portrait, is already contained within inside the stone. And you are both the image and the mason, chiseling away at a more truer image of who you are. Okay, and that final image is the grown oak tree, contained within the acorn. And this is why I think it's such a powerful story, because wherever we look in nature, we see this kind of pattern. So the river that has not yet found the sea from its source, the course of that river, it will always go to the lowest point in the land, depending on where it lands, right? So whether it bashes across this rock, here, there, everywhere, this course of the river was always going to be the same, because it dropped here and it finds its lowest point. And although we might look at that river and go, well, yeah, it came down here and then it went down a valley and then it went, oh, twisted around there, and then a Oxbow Lake formed, and then suddenly it went, whoa, bashed across that, bashed into there, blah, 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 and then went out into the sea, and that cause and effect is how it got there. Well, if you think about that, inevitably, it was always going to take that course, because the river always finds its lowest point, and its lowest point is what takes it to the sea. You know, and you think of that sea, you can think of that as sort of cosmic consciousness, the one unifying soul, where we all end up before we evaporate and get dropped again as individual rain droplets to take whichever course has been chosen for us. It's a nice way of looking at it, and that's why I really like this acorn theory, because rather than victims of circumstance, we are conscious agents. We live in a world of rich stories, and our life is a myth. Our life is a myth. Okay. So I hope you find this of value. Every time you see an acorn, just make sure you pick one up, put one in your pocket, and really just consider that potential that each one of us holds to respond to the events of life and fulfill our destiny, hopefully make this world as beautiful and as bright as possible. Okay? Thanks for listening. Please do like and subscribe, and let me know what you think of this idea. I look forward to hearing from you again. Goodbye.